Welcome to the deep dive. We know you're busy and need to get right to the heart of the information you've shared.
That's right. You want the signal, not the noise.
Exactly. So today, we're jumping into implementing change. We're working from Chapter 21 of Professional Generalism that you sent over.
Yeah, and our goal is to really unpack how change works, or sometimes doesn't work, in groups and organizations based on what's in this chapter.
It looks like a really interesting take. We'll be digging into things like, how do you even decide to try and make a change?
And what makes one option like the right option.
And then how do you actually roll it out effectively?
Precisely. This chapter moves beyond just simple head counts or majority votes. It talks about, well, energy?
Energy. Okay, that sounds intriguing, like the energy people bring.
Sort of. It's about resources, influence, authority, things that actually make change happen or stop it in its tracks. It's a different lens.
Okay, I'm interested. So let's start where the chapter starts. That first big decision. Do we even intervene? Do we try to change things?
Right, the intervention criterion, that's the term they use. It's essentially the point where you or the group decide acting is better than, not acting.
Better than sticking with the status quo.
Exactly. And they bring up this idea of the intervention baseline. It's important because doing nothing isn't, like, neutral.
Ah, so inaction has its own outcomes, its own consequences.
Definitely. If nobody puts their energy behind a change, using the chapter's term, it just fizzles out. It won't happen.
So it's not just, is this a good idea? It's also about, is it acceptable to do this? To the people pushing for it, the change agent.
And to everyone else affected. Yeah, acceptability is crucial for both.
Okay, and this is where it gets tricky, moving beyond that simple majority rules idea.
Absolutely. The chapter really argues that just counting votes for or against, it just doesn't give you the full picture. It's too simplistic.
So what's the alternative then?
They propose, well, looking at this combined index, it pulls together three types of energy. Total energy power, which is like the resources you directly control. Money, people, equipment, that sort of thing.
Got it. Tangible stuff.
Then there's total energy influence. That's more indirect, right? Swaying opinions, shaping the narrative, even without formal control.
The softer side of power.
And finally, total energy authority. This is the formal power, the ability to actually direct other people's energy and resources.
Like the organizational chart kind of power.
Yeah.
So power, influence, authority, the combined energy gives a better sense of who can actually drive the change.
Precisely. It's a more multidimensional view of what constitutes real influence in a change situation. The chapter even notes this links to other research on power dynamics.
And they use a 50% threshold for this combined energy index.
Yeah.
This is a working definition.
Yeah, just for explaining the concept in the chapter. If the total energy behind the change crosses that 50% line, they call it a majority for change in this context.
But they flag that in reality, you might need way more than 50%.
Oh, absolutely. Depending on the scale of the change, the organizational culture, 50% might be nowhere near enough. It's just a conceptual benchmark here.
Okay, that makes sense.
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's say we've decided, yes, we need to intervene. The energy is there. What's next? Choosing which change to make.
Exactly. And the tricky part here is that the change agent's preferred option might not line up perfectly with what the majority in that energy sense wants, or even what a significant minority supports.
Ah, so more potential disconnects.
Right. And to help navigate this, the chapter lays out a change suitability typology.
A typology, okay,
Okay.
like a framework.
Yeah. It helps you map out how acceptable a specific change option is to the change agent, the majority, and the minority. It looks at where there's agreement accord and where there's disagreement discord.
So it visualizes the alignment or lack thereof on the what of the change.
You got it. It helps see where the support and resistance might lie for different possible paths forward.
Okay, decision made, option chosen. Now we have to actually do it. Implementation.
And this brings in the optimization criterion. This is all about how you execute the change. The goal is efficiency, achieving objectives with minimal wasted energy.
But efficiency for whom? That's the question, isn't it?
Exactly. What seems super efficient for the person leading the charge might feel disruptive or burdensome to others who have to adapt.
Right, so I'm guessing there's another typology for this?
You guessed it, the change optimization typology. Same logic, again, mapping out the accord or discord between the change agent, majority, and minority, but this time focused on the process of implementation.
So intervention, suitability, optimization. 3 key decision points.
Yep, and a really key insight from the chapter is that these aren't like isolated choices. The level of agreement can shift at each stage.
Can you give an example?
Sure, the text mentions a scenario. Maybe there's strong disagreement or solid of discord about intervening in the first place.
Okay.
But once the decision is made, maybe everyone agrees on the best option, harmonized accord for suitability. But then there's only partial agreement, maybe some concessions, excused accord, on the how of implementation.
Wow. Okay. So the dynamics can really swing back and forth.
They really can. And this is where the ideas of conformity and radicalization come into play.
Right.
Yeah.
How closely are we sticking to the norms, or how much are we deviating?
Exactly. Depending on that pattern of accord and discord across the three stages, intervention, suitability, optimization, you get different levels of majority conformity.
How much the majority feels aligned.
Minority conformity.
How much the minority feels aligned.
And what the chapter calls radicalization, which is basically how much the change agent's overall approach differs from the established norms or expectations of both groups.
And these can all happen at the same time. High conformity on one aspect, low on another.
Definitely. You might have strong majority agreement on why you're doing something, but the how might seem quite radical, leading to lower conformity there and maybe higher perceived radicalization.
The chapter has those scales, right, for visualizing this.
Yeah.
Tables 21.4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, conceptual scales. They're not like scientifically validated measurements. The chapter is clear about that.
But they help illustrate the point.
Exactly. They show how, for instance, getting harmonized accord, full agreement across all three stages, would mean maximum majority conformity.
And maximum isolated discord across the board would mean maximum radicalization from the change agent's perspective.
Pretty much, yeah. The agent is out of sync with everyone at every step.
And there's that other example they gave. Excused accord for intervention, excused discord for suitability, and isolated discord for optimization. What did that result in?
That combo led to low majority conformity, even lower minority conformity, and considerably high radicalization. It helps you see the potential friction.
So it's about understanding how far you might be pushing against the grain, collectively speaking.
Right. These scales just help visualize those potential gaps from the norms.
So given all these potential mismatches, what's the recommended path? Does the chapter suggest a best way?
It points towards finding a balance, a more, let's say, moderate approach that tries to satisfy majorities, minorities, and the change agents across those three aspects: intervention, suitability, optimization.
Not necessarily full agreement everywhere, but managing the disagreements.
Exactly, like that construction project example they use.
Oh yeah, what was that?
Okay, so imagine everyone agrees the project needs to happen, harmonized accord for intervention.
Broad support there.
Then maybe they incorporate some minority suggestions into the design, making some concessions, excused accord for suitability.
So not perfect agreement, but some give and take.
Right, but then maybe the implementation method chosen is very specific, not standard practice, something only the core team really backs. Isolated discord for optimization.
Ah, so that part is more radical.
Correct. And the chapter shows how this mix results in certain calculated percentages for majority conformity, minority conformity, and radicalization.
And changing just one piece affects those numbers.
Yep. They show if you shifted that optimization piece to be, say, more standard excused discord, the conformity levels would change, maybe radicalization goes down. It highlights the trade-offs.
So you're constantly juggling these factors.
You really are. And context is everything. What level of conformity or radicalization is right depends entirely on the situation.
And crucially, the people in the majority and minority groups might change at each stage.
Yes, that's a vital point. For intervention, deciding if you act well, maybe the key majority energy comes from resource authorities, the budget holders.
Okay.
But for suitability, choosing what to do, the important voices, the majority influence, might shift to subject matter experts or representatives of the people affected.
And for optimization, the how.
Maybe it's professional bodies, regulators, technical specialists who hold the most sway or energy around how things should be done properly. Different stakeholders matter at different points.
Wow, okay. That adds another layer of complexity, but it makes a lot of sense. You need to know who influences which decision.
You really do.
So pulling this all together for our listeners, what are the big takeaways when facing change? It's definitely not just about getting a yes vote anymore.
No, definitely not. I think the biggest shift is redefining majority influence. It's not just numbers. It's that combination of energy, power, influence, authority. Understand who truly holds that energy.
And then consciously think about those three decision points.
Yes. Intervention, suitability, optimization. Analyze them separately, understand the stakeholder dynamics for each, and see where the accord and discord lie.
And be strategic about it. It's not always about maximizing agreement.
Right. Sometimes you need that strategic radicalization, intentionally deviating to innovate or meet specific needs. It's about finding that mix of conformity and difference.
Which also brings in ethics, right? Balancing majority views with minority interests or needs.
Absolutely. That's an underlying tension you always have to navigate.
So the chapter suggests some concrete actions.
It does. 3 main ones. First, map stakeholder influence. Really figure out who has the energy, power, influence, and authority relevant to your change.
Know your players.
Second, tailor change decisions. Don't treat intervention, suitability, and optimization as one big thing. Analyze the dynamics for each stage independently.
Got it.
And third, adopt a mixed approach. Be intentional about mixing conformity and strategic radicalization. Use frameworks, like the ones we discussed, to think through the implications of deviating from norms.
Okay. Map, tailor, mix. Seems like a solid way to approach it.
Yeah, it feels like a way to connect the dots between the big picture planning and the messy reality of actually making change stick.
It definitely gives a much richer framework for thinking about why some changes fly and others just don't. Moving beyond simple acceptance or resistance.
So for everyone listening, as you think about changes in your own work or life, start noticing those different kinds of energy. Who has the resources? Who sways opinions? Who has the formal authority?
Yeah, mapping that out even informally could be really revealing.
It really could.
And maybe here's a final thought to chew on, building on this idea of balancing conformity and radicalization. In your own experience, what single factor do you think most often determines whether an idea that seems radical at first eventually becomes the new normal?
Ooh, that's a good one. Something for people to really mull over.
Definitely. Understanding these deeper dynamics we've talked about today can really equip you to navigate change more skillfully and hopefully create more lasting impact.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for diving in with us today.